Okay, so you can see my screen is just jibber jabber all over the place. I'm gonna start this off like this. We're gonna go ahead and talk about the rest of this vampire document stuff that I got going on here, and let's go. Let's go. So where do we leave off at? We left off at Dracula. So Dracula was a novel written by Bram Stoker, and we're going to go ahead and pull up some information in that regard. So first of all, I have to bring up this slide. Okay. That's a new slide. Let's see here. Slideshow. Let's play it. Come on, let's do it. Let's go. Let's go. Okay, so we done been through all this. Again, astro voodoo, dealing with astrology, astronomy, astrophysics, astrotheology, and voodoo, which encompasses religion. Voodoo being the first religion, of course. So we left off here in regards to vampires and literature. We're going to talk about Bram Stoker. Look at this. And then messed up again. We're going to talk about Bram Stoker. Okay, there we go. There we go. So we're going to bring this up. So Dracula is a novel by Bram Stoker, published in 1897 as an epistolary novel. Let's look up epistolary novels. A novel written as a series of documents. So it was initially put in pieces and then compiled into one book. So let's get that straight. So Dracula was that. Vampires of that. So he was a Transylvanian noble, in which all of this history has come from, Count Dracula. And we're going to go into talking about him. But let's talk about the Bram Stoker situation. So the plot is, and bear with me, Jonathan Harker, a newly qualified English solicitor, visits Count Dracula at his castle in the Carpathian Mountains to help the Count purchase a house near London. Ignoring the Count's warning, Harker wanders the castle and encounters 3 vampire women. So it's always the women in there, as we stated before. And they're highly sexual. Extremely sexual when it comes down to that. So let's go. So so the guy ended up escaping. And once he escapes, he ends up in a hospital in Budapest, which is close to Transylvania. Dracula takes a ship for England in boxes of earth from his castle. The captain's log narrates the crew disappearance until he alone remains bound to the helm to maintain course. An animal resembling a large dog is seen leaping ashore when the ship runs around at Whitby. So that would be probably Dracula, because as we stated before, he can turn into various animals. He can definitely transmute into bats, dogs, wolves. You know, when we say large dog, it probably was a wolf, and more than likely, you know, the archetype of a wolf. So they hunt Dracula down, end up going after him, catching him in his tomb, in his coffin, and stabs him to death. Now, the author, Bram Stoker was actually a manager at some theater and was a recognizable figure. So at that time, he was actually a celebrity, I would say, in those times for the media that was being presented. These romance and sensation novels that he had written prior to this, the book. And by his death, he had published like 18 books. So Dracula was just one of them. So Dracula was Stoker's 7th published book. So he had written several other articles and books before Dracula. And the book that preceded that was The Shoulder of Shasta. And let's see what the difference is. This is a romance novel and is set in the American West. So this is basically a Western romance model, and it's odd how he transcended from that to that. Now let's go to YouTube right now and see what YouTube got to say about Bram Stoker. Let's see here. Google. Let's go to YouTube. Or we go directly to YouTube. Stop playing games. Just getting up, guys. So bear with me. You know, we're gonna make this video popping. You know, it ain't dropping unless it's popping. Everything is about Will Smith slapping Chris Rock, and I don't do those type of videos, so it's definitely an atrocity. Let's go with Bram Stoker and Doc. Let's see what he's got to say. Okay, so here's Bram Stoker right here. You might get some insight right there. Okay.
Vampires gain immortality, but lose the company of men to become their predator.
About vampires.
And whenever we think of vampires, we think Dracula.
Of course.
Risking his life, Jonathan Harker is finally able to escape Count Dracula.
See where I got
The vampire himself leaves the Cobalt Lands, traveling by boat to England, where he hopes to spread his curse.
Well,
How big? Took my hands in one of his, holding them tight, and with the other seized my neck and pressed my mouth to the wound.
take from me.
Making her drink.
So that I must either suffocate or swallow this. Oh my God, what have I done?
And
Seems there's also something regressive about feeding on a partner.
So, you know, Dracula is probably
The real man that Bram Stoker had been inspired by. Dracula, or Vlad the Impaler, known as the Impaler because of the punishment he inflicted upon his enemy.
That's enough of that. So, you know, these are documentaries about Bram Stoker. There's not a lot out here about his early life prior to Dracula. But we know how the story goes, you know. So let's go ahead and go back to the Dracula thing. And we can go back now as we come across. We're here at Vlad III, better known as Vlad the Impaler. Vlad the Impaler. Now, he was the second son of Vlad Dracula, okay, which means dragon. So Dracula means dragon. So let's get that straight. So he was a Romanian nobility, you know, and there's a lot going on with him. So, but he was definitely part of the Order of the Dragon. Now, let's see what that was about. Okay, so the Order of the Dragon was a monarchical, chivalric order, only for selected higher aristocrats. So it's like a secret society. This is the Illuminati for the 1400s by Sigismund of Luxembourg. That's the founder of the Order of the Dragon. So what do? What's the purpose of the Order of the Dragon? We're not going to get off into a lot of historicity, but we just want to know the purpose. Does it equate to dragons and vampires and stuff? Okay, league known the Order of Dragon, written in Latin, called a society's member carried a Draconis, but assigned no name to it. Now, the aim of the order was to fight the Ottoman Empire, defend the Hungarian monarchy from foreign and domestic enemies, and the Catholic Church from heretic and pagans. So they were like protectors of the Catholic Church, this dragon order. Instance with a large fashion of founding chivalric orders during the 14th and early 15th century, not infrequently dedicated to organizing crusades, especially after the disaster of the Battle of Nicopolis. Six-Men's Order was particularly inspired from the Order of St. George of 1326. Another influential model may have been the Sicilian Order of the Ship, found in 1388. So these are just precursors to the Dragon Order. So basically, they're just protectors. This was said that they were protectors, but it's definitely a much deeper meaning because Dracula or Dracula means dragons. So that would be like the plural for Dracula. Let me see if we can get a meaning for that. You know, what does the word Dracula mean? Let's see if we can pull this out. Let's see if we can pull this out. What does the word Dracula mean? Let's see. Son of Dracula. So that's what the Dracula means. So the son of, so the deviation of that. Order of Dracula. The dragon. And this guy here was something else. This Vlad guy. And you can see why they kind of like put the thing on him because Vlad was a stone cold killer in his day. And he definitely was about that life. He was definitely about that life. So let's see what he got to say about that. There's a lot of people been calling me. Okay. William Blunt called me. Little bro. Okay. Other people. That's just personal stuff. Let's go with this. Okay. I'm looking for a job. Got to get money somehow. Now, the son of Dracula. This is why they say, is Dracula a real person? Now, let's look at history.com from the History Channel. And this is just for education purposes, so no copyright infringements, please. Now, the book published in 1897 was based on a story, or probably his best nemesis. It was about vampires. And it pretty much launched a huge popularity to it. So this kind of sums it up. So, published in 1897, Bram Stoker's gothic novel, Dracula, launched an entire genre of literature and film about vampires. These sinister figures who use their supernatural powers to hunt humans and drink their blood to create his immortal anti-hero. So Count Dracula, Stoker certainly drew on popularity. So he's like a villain, a monster, anti-hero, all of the above. But, you know, a heartless monster. He born in Transylvania as the second son of the nobleman Vlad II, Dracula. He took the name Dracula, meaning son of Dracula, when he was initiated into a secret order of Christian knights known as the Order of the Dragon. So this is definitely is about Romanian Prince Vlad Tepes, or Vlad the Impaler. As the ruler of Wallachia, Vlad Tepes, so that was his name, Dracula. So, the story derives from Vlad because that was his name. That name didn't just come up out of the blue by Bram Stoker. This name was already in place. So as the ruler of Wallachia, Vlad Tepes became notorious for the brutal tactics he employed against his enemies, including torture, mutilation, and mass murder. So he was a stone cold killer. Though he didn't shy away from disembowelment, decapitation, or boiling or skinning his victims alive, his preferred method was impalement, or driving a wooden stake through their bodies. And as the last video indicates, I showed pictures of impalement. And it's basically, as it says, states, it's driving a wooden stake through one's body and leaving them to die through exposure, leaving all the blood just running out. And he did this against the Ottoman invaders. He purportedly had as many as 20,000 victims impaled on the banks of the Danube River. Captured by Hungarian forces and in prison, he was finally able to regain his seat in 1476, only to be killed in battle the same year. His day was coming. Some particularly gruesome accounts claim that Vlad liked to dine among the impaled bodies of his victims and would even dip his bread into their blood. So he would be a combination of cannibal and regular, eating habits. These gory details, as well as his legally adopted name, Dracula, and his birthplace of Transylvania, have convinced many scholars that Vlad the Impaler provided partial inspirations for Stoker's famous vampire. We already know that. This is where it derived from. This is where it comes from. So back to the point. Dracula. We know that means son of Dracula. And we know that Vlad was part of that. So this is just an interpretation of a young Vlad at his castle of destruction. So let's go ahead. Nosferatu. This is very interesting because Nosferatu, this would be considered the grandfather of all vampire movies. And we're going to go into discussing it more further. And it was produced by Prana Film. And I guess this was like the first horror flick ever. This is 1922. And, no sound, no color, none of that. And instead of Dracula, our antagonist is Count Orlok. So look at him. Look at Count Orlok with the vampire thing. Look at his ears. Look at his face. Just horrible. He's just a horrible creature to look on. So they had to get somebody that was ugly, the dead, Walking Dead, looking overly pale. And here's just like the theater thing that they used to push out in order to promote the film, Nosferatu. And this is a Prana Film company. And this is definitely a great film to take heed to. So let's go ahead and look deep into this film and see what's really going on. So Nosferatu, a symphony of horror. It's a 1922 silent German expressionist film directed by F.W. Marneau. He was a German film director. And Max Schreck, also a film director. And and he was the star. Actually, this guy was the Nosferatu. He was the lead role as Count. Count Orlok. So, we can see parallels between Count Orlok and Dracula. And then as we go back to that, we can see parallels. So let's see what Count Orlok's about. Now, the story is about a vampire preys on the wife of his estate agent and brings the plague to their town. So he basically passes this vampirism to others, such as like Count Dracula. But he's being renamed Count Orlok. But this film was an unauthorized and unofficial adaptation of Dracula. However, this seems unlike his original German internalities explicitly state that the film is based on the Bram Stoker novel. So, you know, they had no problem copying the novel, but changing the names. And they were sued. And all copies of the film were destroyed because they got sued. A lost film is a feature of short film that no longer exists in the studio archive collection, public archive, or the U.S. Library of Congress. So it's not cataloged, but copies still exist. Okay. So they're definitely just basically taking the story out of Dracula. And the plot is this. So let's talk about Count Orlok. Count Orlok, commonly known noisily as Nosferatu, is the main antagonist and title character portrayed by German actor Max Schreck. As you see him there. Very mean, continence looking guy. In the silent film Nosferatu, Alex Safana des Gronos, he was based on Bram Stoker's character, Count Dracula. In Nosferatu, Cook Orlok is a vampire from Transylvania and is known as the Bird of Death, a feast upon the blood of living humans believed to have been created by Belial, the lieutenant demon of Satan. So there's definitely a spin on that. So it's crazy how Count Dracula or Count Orlok or just basically this vampire genre has a connection with the devil. And you know, we can get deeper into that, but it's just heavy how that going. Look how they got Satan here. This is like a monster villain. It's an illustration dating to the early 13th century in which that monster has been pushed on. And a lot of influences, but we'll do that on another video. But it just definitely has a connection. That's connection to Dracula, the Order of the Dragon. Okay, and then also Satan and Count Orlok. And he like the King of Rats. Again, another metamorphosis of Dracula is becoming a rat. And which is pretty deep. Well, let's get back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so I see Nosferatu. So right now we're going to talk about some more deep stuff. And this is definitely going to be interesting. And this is regarding the different vampire movies and film and what we see in the media and the different portrayals of vampires. So we're going to do a deep dig into this. And then it is ironic how Bram Stoker, the first vampire novelist who created Dracula, also was into romance, adventure, things of that nature before this hit the fan. Very popular, very popular. So where do we start? We start from here. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Twilight Saga. And the Twilight Saga is basically a series of 5 vampire-themed romance fantasy films So I watched Twilight. I wasn't that impressed. I'm looking for blood, gush, death, mayhem. When you see vampire movies, this is what you're expecting. But it didn't happen this way. So the Twilight Saga is a series of 5 vampire-themed romance fantasies. And it was developed by Paramount Pictures. We know that. Well, that's just besides the point. The casting, the films, and everything. But we can go ahead and go into the plot about that and how this influences popular culture in itself. We'll start off with the first one, which is the Twilight, and it's about a 17-year-old girl, Bella. She leaves Phoenix, Arizona, to move to Forks, a small town located on Washington State's Olympic Peninsula, to live with her father, Charlie, the town's police chief. Now, her mother, Renee, is remarried to Phil, a minor league baseball player whose career often keeps them on the road. So her mother is away all the time, but she lives with her dad. Now, Jacob Black was the Native American teen who lives with his father, Billy. And it's so ironic how they just intertwine the vampire and the werewolf genre with each other. And I'm going to go ahead and do a deep dive on werewolves pretty soon. I'm going to do that. That way we can be abreast. So Twilight is just a romance. And then, she's been attacked and she's a vampire and has a boyfriend vampire who subdues her attacker because he's nice and the only nice vampire I've ever seen in my life. And then we go off, and then they made several different episodes of this same theme. A innocent girl becomes a vampire. Now we think vampires are nice. They try to get this image of vampires so they can include them into the popular culture and to make it fair seeming that vampires are nice. We know better. Vampires aren't nice. They're bloodsuckers. They're killers. And that's what they are. So Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1992. This is the film from the book. Now, this is the best film, I think, from the book because it has all the gore, it doesn't paint Dracula and vampires in a fantasy light. It basically paints them as being evil, and that's what they are. So the budget, it was $40 million, but get this, they made $215.9 million from a $40 million investment. What a heck of a payday. And I want to go back to the payday for the Twilight so we can get some insight as to how popular these vampire movies really can be. They could be really popular. Let's go back to this. This is going to tell me exactly what this saga made. So an investment of $401 million for the 5 films totally. And that's a hell of a lot of money. But get this. It has made box office worldwide $3.346 billion. Wise investment. Great that they put that money into that. So it's crazy how the public is so enthused about vampires. You would think that vampires truly exist. And then here we go, Fright Night. This was another comedy vampire movie. Made good money. I mean, $9 million, $7 to $9 million. Made close to $25 million. And it also has a sequel with the Fright Night 2. It probably didn't do as well because I didn't quite like it. I seen Fright Night. Now, the plot for this is a 17-year-old Charlie Brewster is a fan of a horror television program called Fright Night. And the host of that program, Jerry Dandridge, that's not him, that's the vampire. Peter Vincent was the show, and he was a vampire hunter, formerly, or allegedly, because he seemed very scared when he ran into Jerry, the vampire, who lives next door. And Jerry is basically like a play off a Dracula prototype, but yet vampires have been said to have those features and those skills. And so, he goes through a lot and everything, but at the end of the day, the good guy wins, and Charlie ends up getting the best of the vampire, Jerry. And it's just another hero story. But again, made a ton of money, distributed by Columbia Pictures. So keep that in mind. So let's move on. Okay. All right, so Let Me In. This is another genre where they got kids. They're introducing kids as vampires, and then they kill people. And that's what basically said. This civil man taken to the hospital, and then police detective tried to question him about a recent murder. While the detective answers a call outside the room, this figure man jumps out the window, talking about, "I'm sorry, Abby," to his death. A 12-year-old lonely boy and unhappy because he was neglected by his divorced parents. They always capture people at their most vulnerable moments. Unhappiness, lonely, and that because of the things that life throws at us, and the struggles, and parent struggles. But the person that he meets is Abby. Now, Abby's a little girl, and she lives with her dad, but unbeknownst to him, Abby's a vampire. But she's protective of her newfound friend. But yet and still, her hunger for blood overwhelms anything else. So she kills to satisfy this her taste for blood. Abby's a lot older than she looks. She's a child, apparently, but vampires appear not to age once they have been vampire. Once they become vampire.
Right? He knows the door that he's opening that was kicking into him, right? And then now he's kicking in and opening bigger doors for other people, like athletes, like children, like people. And so he has to take
and they end up getting away.
And not just
although
because when you become a public figure,
they were attacked. And then we look like the attackers as if they're the bad guys. But they're not. These bloodthirsty vampires who disguise themselves as kids are the evil incarnation of the devil himself. But the media tries to perpetrate the role like they're the heroes. How dare they come at these kids like this? But they're not kids. They are monsters. So the budget right here was $20 million. Not a total waste of money because they made a little more than what they spent. So it's a profit involved. But not as much as the others because, they're pushing this agenda on us. Let's go to another movie here. Let's see what this is. This is Interview with the Vampire. And this is a movie starring a bunch of popular actors at the time. Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Stephen Ray, Antonio Banderas, Christian Slater, Kirsten Dunst. She was a child then. Now she's grown. How old is Kirsten Dunst? Obviously 82, age 39. So this was years ago that they had this here. The Interview with the Vampire. And although like the last movie, there's a kid theme where she's a little girl and becomes almost like a pedophile, sexuality, and maybe a certain degree of homosexuality being promoted in these vampire movies. And this is just basically a vampire who has regained his heart, who had, sustained his love for humankind for some reason, and he tells his story, and it's very interesting because it's a very good movie. I would say I would recommend watching it for drama's sake, but again, it glorifies the vampires as they become protagonists and antagonists in the same movie. This had a huge box office, which was at $60 million, the budget, and the box office was at $223.7 million. That's over almost 400% of the initial investment. Again, a brilliant movie. I'm not going to get too detailed about it, but this is a brilliant movie. I would definitely recommend checking it out to give you some insight on how they play into this and how they try to infuse this into the culture. Okay, so we're going to go into some more vampire movies, or how they have the Vampire Academy, and it's basically just saying that vampires can become students too. They learn, and they can just be jailed and infused to society just like normal people. They just want to put that in your mind. The Vampire Circus. I looked at a little bit of this. It's definitely a low budget movie. Let's see if they show us a budget on this movie. There's no budget. I figured that because they don't really know what they paid for this movie. But it's an old movie. This was in 1972, April of 1972. And basically, Vampire Circus just pops up out of nowhere and comes into, the light of everything, and the town folks are dismayed by the circus, and the kids come, and their main goal is to kill kids and to spread death and destruction throughout the towns that they occupy the circus. Very evil and very disturbing, I would say. But nevertheless, makes for good entertainment for adults only. So you can have some insight as to what's going on. This is 1972. It's not the greatest movie, but definitely gives us some insight on how they infuse that into the culture. Vampire in Brooklyn. They took America's Funny Man, Eddie Murphy, and turns Eddie Murphy into a vampire, and there's killing and bloodshed, but then there's comedy. So they try to ingest that with it. So they want us to smile as people die and laugh as people die, which is horrendous. And let's check out the budget on this movie, just to be honest. $14 million, they more than doubled their money at $35 million. And they want to make it seem funny, but people are actually dying. So if you don't know no better, you'll take this seriously, and you'll think that this was the way of life. And then vampire virus, like the coronavirus, COVID-19, said that it's passing on. The vampire. And this transcending and evolving into the mainstream, it's a conspiracy for vampires. The question is, why? Why are they conspiring to feed this into the public minds and to have the kids indoctrinated into this vampire thing? Now, here's the question. Now, are vampires real or imagination? Let's see. The vampire black and bloodthirst is accustomed to. The vampire bat is definitely how they come off with this, and then it's just mankind's imagination. So I'm going to say A for imagination. In that regard, vampires of ancient myth and pseudo-historical context. There's no real proof of vampires. It's a message in the metaphysical science that can be interpreted. As I stated, vampires and Satan and the devil go hand in hand as demons and bloodthirsty and anti-life. Now, the vampire is a figment of mankind's imagination in order to cope with death and darkness. So let's see how this works. Now, Morbius, the Living Vampire, is a movie that's coming out from Marvel. And it's basically what you call a comic book character that was created. And then also, it definitely doesn't vilify, nor does it make it a hero. Now, his first appearance was in October of 1971. This is around the time that this vampire craze was going berserko in the movie genres and stuff like that. They wrote Dracula for a number of years, but then other vampires started appearing, and then they even put it in the comic books for kids. It's Morbius, the Living Vampire, meaning that he's somewhat like a daywalker or whatever, that he turns into Morbius, the craziest vampire you can ever see. But yet still, again, they want to make him a hero. They want to put this vampirism into the minds of your kids through media and through the superhero genre. So this is how they indoctrinate your kids. This is a shame, and we need to do something about it. And I'm just here to bring awareness, and thank you for coming to my channel. I believe that this might be the end of my presentation. Let's check more. Yeah, this is the end of the slideshow. I really enjoyed you guys attending my particular lecture on vampires, and then I'll be on to the next video. We're going to talk about werewolves. So God bless, and stay focused, and my job is to bring awareness. Peace and love.